Thank you very much, Affairs, again, for highlighting the big issues going on in the world and how it is impacting on Africa and how it is impacting on Nigeria, Sierra Leone. With these issues, we wanted to have a conversation with His Excellency and also with the governors and the audience by asking a few questions and get your reflection on that based on Dr. Ghanem's presentation. Your Excellency, how do you see the changing geopolitical situation and its possible impact on our countries?
Thank you very much, and went to you, DG, and IITA for providing this platform for us to be able to critical issues relating to food security in our region, in our countries. With what is happening around the world, there are serious implications for what will happen to us in Africa, different countries. Definitely, we are always at the receiving end of all of these activities. And I don't think we are going to be spared again with the geopolitical tensions and the many changes that are taking place around the world. I think it's time to tighten our belt, sit up, because definitely the ramifications are going to come down to us in terms of how we manage development, which should be our preoccupation. With me in particular in Sierra Leone, and I think for the rest of Africa, we should be thinking about how we are going to fill in the gap that is going to be created, especially in terms of development financing, as everybody is cutting their on their development finance, and to support their own priorities, which is really about protection of their territories, interests, and where they want to be in the world.
Thank you very much, Excellency. That's very, you're fully right on that one. I have a second question, if you permit me. Regionalization is one response to deglobalization and rising international tensions. How do you see the AFCFTA evolving? I should also mention that African leaders signed onto the AFCFTA, but progress has been slow. What will it take to make regional trade a reality?
I think Africa has to rise up to the occasion and do so with a strong sense of urgency. We've been talking about, first let's come to the sub-regional, which is ECOWAS. We've been talking about integration for the last, I don't know how many years, over 30 years, and we are yet to achieve that. And at the continental level, we have all signed up, but then taking it to fruition in terms of making sure that there's free movement of people, goods and services is yet to be achieved. There has to be the political will, which I don't think is forthcoming because of us at this level jealously guarding our sovereignty to the extent that it is affecting our development, because individually our countries make up a very small market, and for us to be able to take things to scale, we should be able to come together concertedly and do certain things. Certain infrastructure, especially for agriculture, has to be at the regional level. And we know that Africa spends about 50 billion importing food from out of the continent, and we really have no business doing that. $50 billion every year, annually, means that if we are investing even half of that on food security on the continent, we'll be far gone in a very short time. But malnutrition is still present here. Food insecurity is all around us, and unemployment, and many of the challenges, economic challenges that we have. I talk about agriculture and try to do things in that space because I think it has a multiple effect on our country. It's not only about food security, it's not only about malnutrition, but also about the economy, which is very, very important for us all. So the agricultural transformation that we want to embark on. And when I talk about also agricultural transformation, it should be food sovereignty. And that food sovereignty is not limited to the national borders that we have. I want to be able to import from Nigeria or Ghana or Guinea, my closest, instead of having to import from around the world. When we had a problem in Ukraine, we all sat grumbling as if Ukraine was the breadbasket. Indeed it was, but we have seen what other countries have done in Africa. For instance, Ethiopia was a net importer of most of the food products. I mean, we could adequately describe it as a hungry nation 15, 20 years ago. Today they are exporting. In fact, they started their wheat program less than 10 years ago, and now they are net exporters of wheat. It means when policy and action comes together in Africa, added to political will, we really have no business wasting $50 billion every year to import things that can be grown in Africa. And if we add industrialization, the value chain to that, we should be trading within our countries. So I decided to come here really, one, to show the importance of this institute as one of the strategic partners for any nation that is serious on agriculture. And I could have sent my Minister of Agriculture or Finance to come, but I think that because of the primacy of the role that you play to inform smart decisions as far as agricultural transformation is concerned, I decided to come myself and not to depend or rely on reports. And yesterday, I had a feel of some of the facilities and activities that you are engaged in here. And I think that if we all use the opportunities, the innovation, the technologies, and also the research that is being done here, it will help us a great deal. And we should not be a hungry continent. We should not be using $50 billion. If we are investing that every year in Africa, we'll be a different continent in a very short time.
Well, thank you, Excellency, for such an inspiring statement. Building on what you just said, I mean, we have no business really importing or spending $50 billion to import food that we can produce here. And I agree with you. Imagine what this $50 billion can do in terms of technology, education, and health, you know, and we are exporting the money outside the continent. So, having said that, and given what you just said, Your Excellency, many of us have been arguing for increased Pan-African action on food security, to increase African funding for agriculture, for irrigation, to encourage greater African fertilizer production. Do you think that there is a political appetite for greater African joint action on agriculture and food security issues?
I think I partially answered that when I referred to our inability to act together as African nations, even at the sub-regional level. It's been difficult to get us, the politicians, to accept that we have to act concertedly. And until and unless we are able to do that, our people are going to continue to suffer on the continent, because we must prioritize what is priority. Food security is not just about food security. It's about our economy, it's about health, it's about employment, it's about a lot of things. So with the exception of a few countries like what has been done in Ethiopia, Rwanda, Tanzania, that have done a great deal as far as agriculture or food security is concerned, it's been difficult to get us at the highest levels to take agriculture seriously because of the many advantages it brings to us. So the sort of infrastructure, let's talk about fertilizer facility. Because of the size of our countries, individual countries, we need to have regional cooperation, which Hafez referred to be able to act together, to have a facility, let's say for West Africa or for even the Mano River basin. But this is quite difficult to come by because different countries have different priorities. I think as a continent, like Hafez said again, we had committed to agriculture. On paper, the 10% that we had accepted as the level of a national budget to support agriculture, I don't know how many countries, I don't have the statistics, but in our instance, in fact, I have had to, just in a year, move it from 2% to 7%. That's good. And that is a commitment. The investment needed to support agriculture is quite huge. And, but that doesn't mean that we should avoid it. Food security, for me, is existential. And therefore, we have to do everything, mobilize, like Hafez said again, internal resources, especially in the face of the slashing of development funds around the world. It's going to come home to roost. So we should be ready for it by mobilizing our own domestic revenue and also working with the private sector, doing those things that can make it easier, doing the heavy lifting as far as agriculture is concerned, so that it becomes easier, basically helping or attracting the private sector to come in. But it's easier to say, but having started my journey towards agriculture revolution or transformation in Sierra Leone, it's quite huge, because to successfully embark on this journey, you need what is required as the highway to these areas. Our rural areas are involved in agriculture. And until and unless, again, we can put in the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, electricity, water, some of it is not easy to be able to get these areas to produce the quantum of food that we need. And within our national budgets, with the headwinds we've been facing since COVID and in the aftermath of COVID, it's been extremely difficult for us to meet the 10% of national budget. And with what is happening around the world now, it's only going to get tougher. Nobody is going to come to our aid. So we have to, as leaders, and I'm happy that we have a few other governors who are here. I'm sure we are grappling with similar problems. Nobody wants to be hungry. But what is the investment required? It's not easy to come by. The will is there, but then we need not only the will, but the technical support, which backstock, which you, IITA, and many other institutions can provide. But in addition to that, we need to have the requisite amount of funding to be able to or investment. And so in Sierra Leone, what we are doing is we are trying as much as possible to de-risk, to invest, to do the heavy lifting as much as we can, and to bring in the private sector. I don't know if there are private sector representatives here. You know, they like the highway. They don't like to go and do the heavy lifting. They are seeking profit. So you have to do all the hard work. But when they come in, as and when they come in, they can actually make the impact. And that partnership among the government, the private sector, the research institutions, is very, very important. And I must comment also, even before things have started to go wrong again in the world, it's been difficult. The international financial institutions have not made it easy for us to access the requisite funds. Even for the richer countries, quite a lot is borrowed in order to invest in certain infrastructure, because the quantum of money needed to invest, let's say, in infrastructure, when you talk about electricity, telecommunication, the road system, it's not easy to come by within. You cannot cater for that within national budgets. But it's been extremely difficult dealing with the international financial institutions. I am the coordinator of for the whole of Africa for representation in the UN Security Council. And as we ask for reform of the United Nations Security Council, which is going to be 80 very soon, nothing has moved. The 5 permanent members are not ready to accept us to get in there. And they are manning the gate. But we'll keep making that noise until they open the gate and we will enter there. That is a similar noise I want us to make, positive noise, because the international financial system must make available to countries in Africa that the requisite financial resources to be able to embark on meaningful food security. We can claim to do 60% of arable land, but if you do not invest, you cannot. So that is the big problem that we are facing, the financial resources.
Thank you very, very much, Excellency. A round of applause. Thank you very much. First, the President has made reference to financing issues in international financial institutions, and as a former World Bank Vice President for all of Africa, Middle East, any reflection on your side about how this can be looked at?
Yeah, thank you. Is this working? Yeah. Thank you very much, Simeon, and thank you very much for your discussion, Mr. President. I think you made a very, very important points. And I believe, I would like to, before I go to your question, I would like just to follow up on something that Mr. President said, which is, if we cannot feed ourselves, we can never be sovereign, really. if we depend on others to feed us, then the concept of sovereignty, I don't understand. So it is important, that's much better. So it is important for Africa really to focus on this issue of food security and agriculture. Now, when I look at our continent, Africa is 1.4 billion people, more or less the size of India, but it is divided into 54 countries, whereas India is one country. So we need to work together, and I believe in three, and maybe learn a lot from India, by the way, in three areas. One is research and technology in agriculture. If we want to increase yields in agriculture, we have to use better seeds. We have to use better technologies. We need, if each one of our 54 countries will try to have its own, which is what is happening now, try to have its own research facility, its own extension facilities and so on, we will never succeed, because each country is too small to have an impact. Why don't we focus, and that is maybe a job for you, Simeon, is to let us really develop as a more centralized Pan-African agriculture research and technology center, maybe building up on IITA, which already exists. So that is my first point. The second point is that, again, if we want to increase yields in Africa, we have to use more fertilizers. Why aren't our farmers using fertilizers? I think roughly 2/3 of the fertilizers used in Africa are imported. And the price of fertilizers in Africa is much higher than anywhere else in the world. So there's a cost element. So we need to produce our own fertilizer and to bring down the cost of fertilizers for the farmers. Now, I remember when I was country director in Nigeria, in Abuja, a long time ago actually, when President Obasanjo was the president here in Nigeria, he organized an African fertilizer summit to try to actually encourage fertilizer production on the continent. And I attended that summit. There were lots of great speeches, but then nothing happened. We have, if you look at the continent, we have already two very big assets in terms of fertilizers. We heard yesterday from the OCP representatives, OCP in Morocco, and we have Dangote here in Nigeria, who is also producing fertilizers. So why can't we, working with our existing companies, try to develop a fertilizer industry across the continent? So that is a second area, the research, fertilizer production, and the third area again is irrigation. Again, can we imagine some joint irrigation projects across the continent? So there have been always discussions of building dams and irrigations. I remember for the last 20 years or so, there have been discussions about the Inga 2 dam in DRC, and it has not moved. So there and those are big projects that will have impacts across several countries. So again, I believe that there are practical things that each country on its own will not succeed in doing it alone. But if we do it together as 54 countries, 1.4 billion people, it can be done. So now on your question on the reforms, and I will go back to what Mr. President said about the Security Council. It is the same thing in the global financial institutions. Exactly the same thing, Mr. President. There has been this discussion. The Secretary General of the United Nations organized the Summit for the Future last year, and they had a very nice discussion about giving more voice to developing countries in the World Bank and the IMF and so on. But again, it is like the Security Council. It's a zero-sum game. If you give more voice to somebody, it means that somebody else will lose some of their voice. And those who are there are blocking the gates, as you very aptly said it. So I think that this is, but we need to continue to push for the reforms of those institutions. Those are important institutions that are contributing importantly to our development. We need to have more voice in those institutions. And I think by giving developing countries, especially Africa, more voice, the credibility of the institutions will be enhanced. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hafez. A lot of applause for him, also to the President. Yeah. Before we conclude, I'd love to invite one or two questions from the audience, and high-level questions. Please raise your hand, and I will direct them to our speakers. Question. Yeah, Excellency,
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for this session. I want to congratulate the President of the Sierra Leone, as well as the former Vice President of the World Bank. I've listened to your own presentation. I want to make a comment as well as a question. One of the comments that you made is regarding the support that we are receiving from other nations, from USAID and others. For me, I don't think this will be a great problem for us. Especially, I want to give you an example from my own home state, Borno State. Because we face insurgency for a long period of time, we reach a time whereby our people completely rely on aid. So these donors have created dependence in our own home state. We reach a stage whereby we made some certain clarifications that henceforth we don't need some support in some certain areas. I believe we can do away with them if we want to move forward. I heard you said it's cutting its spending EU and others. I don't think this will be a challenge for us. That will be even an opportunity for us to grow stronger. If we are committed enough. On the issue of funding, I think we refuse to prioritize agriculture. If we can prioritize agriculture, I think funding will not be a problem for us. Then secondly, the Vice President has also spoken about nutrition deficiency. This will not be a big problem for us. In this continent, we have a lot of food items that are very nutritious. We have soybeans, we have beans, we have peanut seed, we have all of them. Why can't we develop a local food solution? It can simply be done instead of importing none and others of billions of nairas outside the African continent. Then, coming down to the issue of what you said about the mechanization. We can spend more on local mechanization. We can develop our local technologies. This is also feasible. But my question is that you have made peers about reducing funding and others. Then as African continent, how can we get resources within Africa? The last but not the least, you suggested something very important. Then how can we be food sufficient? I think Mr. President will take the bull by its horns.
to see that how African nations will invest in agriculture based on their comparative advantage. For example, Sierra Leone, you have the rainfall is not a limiting factor in Sierra Leone. You can invest hugely, heavily in rice farming so that other African continents can procure rice from Sierra Leone. Likewise, Nigeria also has some certain advantage, cassava and others. I think what we need to do more is about political will and commitment to drive the process. But most importantly, I want to direct my question to both of you then. You are speaking about resources. How can we galvanize resources within Africa in order to leapfrog agriculture from where we are to a higher pedestal? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Excellency, Governor Zulum. Who would like to start to answer his question first, or the President?
Okay. Thank you very much. Hafez doesn't want to talk before the President. You have been at the World Bank, so I thought that in terms of investment or resources needed to really embark on meaningful food security programs in our in all of Africa is needed. How do we get that? I think this is where we have to think out of the box. There is no ready-made solution. And depending on the nation, the size of a country, and how you package your program, we have a growing financial, what in Africa now. Let's talk about the financial institutions that we have. They are ready to put their money there, provided you can bring about bankable projects. If we can structure, and this is where, in our discussion yesterday, for institutions like the banks wanting to invest, or individuals going to lend from the banks to invest, they want to see the soundness of the business model that you have. If you want billions to invest, they want to make sure that you have a strong technical backup. If you have an institution like this, the IITA, backstopping your program, and you can show the flow, I'm sure within our financial institutions, we'll be able to raise the necessary fund. Aside from our budgets are never, they will never move us. The best they can do is to run our ministries of agriculture. But he spoke about irrigation. Irrigation is very paramount. But if we have to have national irrigation and cross-border irrigation systems, this requires huge sums of money that is not easily available to any of our companies engaged in agriculture. So I think that question you've posed should exercise our minds as leaders. Now that we know that food is existential and that we have to embark on successful agrarian transformation, where do we get the funds in a world that is becoming hostile? I mean, everything, if you can see, the far right in every country is gaining momentum. And who did they talk about? They call us immigrants. We eat their cats and everything, and even their dogs in their countries. So we have to be responsible. We have to not only look at the investment towards productivity, but also the value chain. Like you said, we should not be, we had a crisis in Sierra Leone and we are grumbling about onion. There was no onion. And I said to them, onion, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not a very good cook, but it's just for flavor. If you have rice and the other things, You should be able to eat and forget about the flavor. Otherwise, you grow your own onion. Don't ask me about onions. I want to make sure there is rice, the major component, carbo, protein, and the other things. If you want your flavor, go and plant, or don't ask me to import. As simple as onion. 2 years ago, we had a challenge. And I hear the governor from Plateau State is the biggest producer of what we normally call Irish. Maybe we should be calling it Plateau potatoes, not Irish potatoes. Exactly. Why are we importing potatoes? For goodness sake. In the whole of Africa, we are wasting the hard-earned currency that we get. And that's why we continue to be poor. 50 billion, I keep referring to this amount. It's not small sum. Every year, 50 billion. In the next 4 years, is 200 billion. 200 billion. And that is what we go and ask to bring in. So we have to make certain policy adjustments, commitments at the highest political level. And from what I know now, agriculture is a science. It's a science. You have a whole seed system that should be correct. You have the research component that should be there to support every stage that you do. And then you have also the agribusiness that is involved in the processing. For instance, I normally cite this. Most of us drink coffee every day. We produce coffee in Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and the whole of Africa. But just to roast it and package it, we send it to Europe. They roast it, which you can do in your pot. Even your wife can do it, or you can do it. And then they put it in a packet and put a huge price tag on it, and then we buy it now and start to drink it here. Just for roasting. We actually just send it for roasting and packaging. So there is so much we need to be serious about agriculture. So it's not just about talking, policy discussions. Like you said, the question you asked is a question you should ask us or when we are sitting together as leaders. And then we will bring in the private sector. How do we get money from you guys so that we can do what we want to do to change the economy? Because agriculture is not about food security and money. It's also about the economy. It's also about the youth bulge that we have. How do we employ our people and stop them from going to cross across the Mediterranean and our youths dying? It is about all of these, and no country, very few countries, Hafiz, I think you can correct me when you intervene, has succeeded. Even those that are at the industrial or want to go now to the moon and thinking about AI have succeeded without a strong agricultural transformation. None, very few, I must say, very few countries. So it means it is an inevitable pathway to development. Agriculture transformation is an inevitable pathway to sustainable development. We can't avoid it, so we must do it. And when you have to do it, that's why I say it's existential. The United States, the United Kingdom, they have 200-300 years ago done it. That's why even with all the challenges, except I see in America they said there was shortage of eggs. We can supply if we are producing enough eggs. Yes, there's shortage of eggs now. So we could be making money instead of, in Sierra Leone, for instance, the other time they import chicken, they import eggs. I say eggs, import them here. We have to stop that. And very soon we are going to stop the import of eggs and we raise our own chicken and eggs. So we are wasting too much time and money. We are sending the jobs away and our children are chasing these jobs out there. When you just take raw material and send it, you are actually sending all the value, all the work and everything to those countries. And then our children go chasing those and they die in the process. That is an indictment. And that question we should answer together. I will call you to Sierra Leone. We'll sit down. That's why we go great very quickly, leaders, because we have to answer questions like that. It's not an easy, but there's all. We have a growing financial institution in Africa that should be able to raise funds for us to embark on meaningful programs like agriculture. Thank you.
Well, I made a mistake, Mr. President. It's very hard to speak after you. I would like to stress 2 points, one made by His Excellency the Governor and one made by you, Mr. President. His Excellency the Governor, when he talked about nutrition, he said that actually we have everything that is needed to ensure good nutrition. And I have to say, I agree with you 100%. And I will give you an example from a project that I worked on many, many years ago in one of the poorest countries in Africa, which is Madagascar. In Madagascar, the rate of child malnutrition was extremely high. And we put together a project which actually did not import food or medicine to enhance the children's nutrition. It was to educate the mothers on how to feed the children using the local production. I did not realize it, but the scientists showed us that actually locally, just using local food, if you educate the mothers, you can resolve the problem of malnutrition. So that is an example. It's a real life example that I had, an experience that I had, which shows that you are absolutely right, Excellency. And this is an area where we need to do more and to work more using our local resources to ensure good nutrition, especially for the children. Mr. President, you said something on financing, and that is also to respond to the Governor's question. You said we have to think outside the box. And I agree with you also 100%. And I will give you two again, and I believe that outside the box means also developing public-private partnerships. And I will give you two examples of projects, again, that I know of, that I worked on, where we got financing, private financing for agriculture and support for smallholder farmers. Again, one example is from Madagascar again, and the other one example is from my own country, from Egypt. The example from Madagascar was that we actually financed a private producer of perfumes. They were given a small lot of land, and they helped the farmers around them to produce flowers that are used to do those essential oils. And they built a small factory for essential oils. So what this private company did was actually they taught the farmers how to grow this plant for the essential oil for perfumes. They financed them. They provided financing to the farmers. And they bought all of the farmers' output. So the farmer gained because now he was selling at a higher price, this high value added product, getting a higher price. The private company then took those flowers, I think, and they produced those essential oils and exported it. They were exported it to Europe. And this private company also gained. So this is an example of what we call outgrower schemes, where the farmer continues to own the land, the private company provides financing, provides inputs, provides knowledge, and ensures marketing. And it's a win-win. It's win for the private sector, it's win for the farmer, and it's win for the country and the government that helped organize that. The other example from Egypt is on potatoes. That was farmers in Egypt, in the north of Egypt, around Alexandria, around the Mediterranean, always produce potatoes. But they produce a kind of potato that only an Egyptian would eat. They cannot export. So there came actually an exporter, and he brought with him an Italian company. And what they did was they taught the farmers how to produce a different kind of potato that is in demand in Italy. And again, they provided the inputs, the know-how, the knowledge, and they ensured that the purchase of the crop. And this crop, those potatoes were then exported to Italy. Again, the farmers gained because the price of the Italian potato was like 2 or 3 times higher than the price of the Egyptian potato. And the country gained from the export revenues, and the private person made profits. So again, win-win-win kind of solutions. So those are the kinds of outside the box. And those are real life examples that I actually experienced. But I mean, those are small projects here and there. We need to really multiply it and do much more around the continent.
Thank you very much. Thank you. A round of applause. Governor of Plateau. Okay, we'll take a question from the Governor of Plateau, and
thank you.
We'll do the last one.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you,
Governor Oyo. Okay.
The Vice President of the World Bank. Mine is more of a contribution. Now that we've hit the issue of finance, it's something that has always bothered my mind. And I'm glad you said, as leaders, we have to think through this together. I had the privilege last year to address the Black Caucus of the American Chamber of Commerce. And the investable funds the Black Caucus sits on is mind-blowing. Is in thousands of billions of dollars, just the Black Caucus. And they are looking for how to ship it back to Africa. But as soon as I left, fear caught me. What are they going to invest in? Do we have statistics? Do we have data? Do we have the requisite organizational framework? You talked about the business model. And we've been talking about food and the potentials in Africa. And I think for too long we've remained at the level of potential. We need to bring in science, we need to bring in business, we need to bring in organization, management into agriculture if we're going to attract the finance that is available there. I do not think that finance is lacking, particularly if we also join in the diaspora community. These are areas I think we need to explore in a more logical fashion. The money is sometimes like a prostitute. It goes where there is a customer. And they need to find us attractive. They need to find us inviting. If not, the funds would simply not come. And I think it's not rocket science. We can go beyond the institutional framework of the international financial organizations, of the development partners, and the private sector. And I'm glad he talked about the public-private sector partnership, that we can actually leverage on this going forward and attract the requisite funding for agriculture.
Thank you very much, Excellency. Maybe I would like to take the last question.
Maybe I just...
Oh, you want to answer this one? Okay.
Yeah, no, don't answer. Actually, to not respond, but to make a footnote on what he's just said. The governor from Borno raised a very important question. No, Borno. Now, we are not yet out of here. We've started answering that question. There are resources, but access to those resources. What is required to access those resources? So we are beginning to answer your question. So we have a pending meeting There should be a meeting so that we can, then it is important to answer that question. He's answered a bit of it. If we bring in the private sector, who will tell us how to unlock that potential, and bring in the researchers, once those guys know that we have a strong business model and that we have providing the data that this is profitable. Africa is going to need so much rice, cassava. China is going to require how many billions tons of cassava, and it is worth this. And Nigeria, West Africa can produce this. They will put their money in there. So that is why, for the most part, we engage. We are in silos in Africa. We created those silos, and we are not talking across. And because we are in those silos, some of the simple questions that are actually needed to be answered to unlock our potential, we have not.